Okay, let's get into this. You know that famous line, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Dickens, yeah. A Tale of Two Cities.
Exactly. And, well, it wasn't just about France, was it? It really hit home right here in London, showed a city just completely split down the middle.
Absolutely split.
So today we're doing a deep dive into that split, late 19th century London, looking hard at sickness and poverty and how tangled up they were.
It's really striking how those huge contrasts played out, in people's everyday lives. We're pulling from quite a mix of sources today.
Yeah. What do we got?
Well, some really insightful reflections on like the social problems back then,
Yeah.
but also, surprisingly, records from a London cricket club.
A cricket club. Okay.
Yeah, and even documents linked to, the Jack the Ripper case.
Right. Okay. Intriguing mix.
And, there's that cholera notice from St. Catherine Docks way back in 1832. It's just such a stark early sign of how disease was always lurking.
Yeah. A constant threat. So our mission today really is to get a proper feel for those massive health and social challenges in Victorian London.
How it all worked on the ground.
Exactly. How it all manifested. And, well, you might be surprised, actually, by some connections we find, even connecting to that really infamous mystery.
And that's kind of the power of this approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
Using sources that seem, you know, totally unrelated at first glance.
Right.
So we've got this reflective piece on sickness and poverty, the Blackheath Cricket Club records we mentioned, and the Ripper documents. Putting them all together, it gives you a much, much richer picture.
Okay, so London divided. Dickens saw it, painted this picture of incredible wealth right next door to just awful poverty.
And it wasn't just a story backdrop. It was real, and it had a huge impact, obviously, on people's health.
Yeah, I bet.
Think about how fast London grew in the 19th century. I mean, the sheer speed. It went from under 1 million people to, what, 6.5 million?
6.5 million. Wow.
By the end of the century. And that kind of explosion puts just immense pressure on everything. Basic services.
Like water, sanitation.
Water, sanitation, housing, all of it was under incredible strain.
And that kind of environment, it's perfect for epidemics, isn't it?
A breeding ground.
Yeah.
Exactly. You had these constant threats like cholera, typhoid.
Awful diseases.
And it's easy to think they just hit the poor, but, they did cross class lines. Although, obviously,
Obviously, if you're in a crowded slum, your risk is way higher.
massively higher. And look at the life expectancy back then, mid-century, just 37 years on average.
37.
Yeah.
That's shocking.
It is. And a huge part of that was child mortality, just tragically high.
And the conditions, you mentioned the conditions.
Oh, the daily conditions, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to even imagine. Needing people, crossing sweepers, just to clear a path through the streets because of all the dust and, well, horse manure.
Ugh.
And that summer diarrhea people talked about killed so many babies, mostly flies breeding on all that waste, rotting food in the streets.
Grim. And didn't the Thames itself become a problem? The Great Stink.
Oh, the Great Stink.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1850s. I mean, the river was basically an open sewer.
Just everything thrown in.
Everything. Human waste, dead animals, rotten food, factory chemicals. The smell alone, apparently, got so bad Parliament couldn't even sit. Forced them to do something.
Incredible. And what's interesting, too, is what they thought caused disease back then.
Right. The initial idea was the smell itself, the bad air. Miasma theory, they called it.
So just breathing it in made you sick?
That was the dominant theory, yeah.
Yeah.
It took Dr. John Snow. His work was groundbreaking.
The cholera guy.
Exactly. He showed it wasn't the air, it was the water. He tracked the cholera cases back to one specific contaminated water pump. A revolutionary idea back then.
When everyone else was blaming the smell.
Yeah. But things did start to get better, slowly, didn't they? Towards the end of the century. Public health did improve.
Thankfully, yes.
Definitely. Joseph Bazalgette's sewage system, that was just monumental. A proper, coordinated way to deal with waste.
And that must have made a real difference.
Oh, a huge difference. You
Yeah.
can actually see it in the figures.
Yeah.
Like in Whitechapel, the death rate from typhoid, it went from like 116 per 100,000 people down to just 13.
Wow, that's a massive drop.
Huge. But, and this is the crucial bit our sources really hammer home,
Okay.
even with those big improvements, that deep, grinding poverty, it was still the main thing driving bad health for so many Londoners. Maybe, what, a third of the
And
population?
a third still living in those conditions.
That's the point, yeah. The better off folks could move out to the suburbs, healthier places. But the inner city slums, they just stayed squalid, stayed unhealthy.
Right.
George Gissing, he wrote about it so vividly. Those constant evil smells in Southwark, from the butchers, the fish shops, the pubs, the sewers, It really paints a picture of what daily life was like for the poor.
And it wasn't just the smell affecting them, was it? The sources mentioned physical traits.
Yeah, the reflective piece talks about that. This
Mm.
sort of unhealthy look, the pallor, people being physically weaker, even the way they talked.
How so?
Well, this loud sort of slang,
Yeah.
attributed partly to breathing through their mouths all the time because their noses were blocked up.
From the air pollution.
Exactly. Constantly breathing in granite dust, soot, all sorts of, quote, nauseous substances.
Terrible. And the biggest killers were still things like TB.
Yeah, consumption, tuberculosis, and other lung diseases, they remain the biggest causes of death. And you saw the effects starkly when they tried to recruit for the Anglo-Boer War.
Ah, right. They found many men were just unfit.
Shockingly unfit. Even Jack London, when he visited it around 1903, he commented on it. Said London's working class seemed less capable of hard physical work than people from the countryside. Poverty was literally wearing people down.
It's like poverty was a disease itself. And then there was this whole Victorian obsession with cleanliness, which actually made the divide worse.
In a way, yes. Cruelly ironic, isn't it?
Oh,
As the middle and upper classes got bathrooms, running water,
right.
the poor, who just didn't have those facilities and often couldn't even afford soap, they got labeled the Great Unwashed.
God, that's harsh.
And you read accounts from middle-class charity workers. Their reactions to the smell of the slums were often quite visceral.
And these charities, they connected being clean with being, like, morally better.
Yeah, there was definitely an element of that, this civilizing mission idea. They genuinely seemed to think that handing out free soap and disinfectant could somehow improve people, not just physically, but morally, too. Healthy bodies, healthy minds, that kind of thing.
But soap doesn't fix hunger, does it? Malnutrition was still a massive issue.
Oh, fundamental. Absolutely critical. The reflection piece estimates, tragically, maybe 500 people a year just died of starvation in London.
Starvation. Just awful.
And even those not literally starving often had terrible diets, hardly any fresh fruit or vegetables, which led to things like rickets, vitamin deficiencies, especially in kids.
I mean, the food itself could be dangerous. No fridges, obviously.
Exactly. Contamination was a huge risk. Remember that awful diarrhea epidemic in 1871?
You mentioned milk.
Yeah, turned milk. Killed 300 people, mostly children, in just 3 weeks. Horrifying.
And you can't really separate this from family size and poverty, can you?
No, they're completely intertwined. Big families, extreme poverty, and these devastating infant mortality rates in the slums. Nearly 15% in 1901.
15% of babies dying before their first birthday.
Yeah. Main causes. Things like congenital syphilis passed down, that constant diarrhea we talked about, and mothers just not having enough nutritious breast milk because they themselves were malnourished.
There's that image in the source material, isn't there? Starving family.
Incredibly powerful image. And the other one, the young mother, totally exhausted, making matchboxes while her child sleeps beside her. Just captures the sheer grind of casual labor.
Yeah. And the work itself, you could get it, was often dangerous, too.
Definitely. Those sweated industries, particularly in the East End, garment factories, for example.
Often employing immigrants.
Yeah, lots of newly arrived Jewish immigrants often worked there. Conditions were usually terrible, cramped, steamy, no ventilation, perfect for spreading TB.
It's just layer upon layer of hardship. But amidst all this, there were people trying to help, right? Charities.
Oh, absolutely. It's important to remember that. Lots of philanthropic groups, both religious and secular, worked tirelessly. Like the Metropolitan Hospital's Sunday Fund. They did amazing work, not just helping directly, but also lobbying the government for change.
And they actually funded things that made a difference.
Yes, definitely. Our sources show they backed initiatives that led to real, gradual improvements, creating green spaces, for instance.
Like Victoria Park.
Exactly. Called a vital lung for the East End.
Yeah.
And groups like the Metropolitan Drinking Fountain and Cattle Trough Association, quite a mouthful, work to provide clean drinking water.
And who paid for this stuff?
Often wealthy individuals, people like Baroness Burdett Coutts or the Maharaja Vizianagaram even. Private philanthropy was huge.
And specialized hospitals, too.
Yes, that was crucial. Hospitals focusing on the big killers, like consumption. The City of London Hospital for Consumption and Chest Diseases. It's the London Chest Hospital now is one example. Treating diseases that hit the poor hardest.
And things like public baths, wash houses.
Yeah, providing basic hygiene facilities. By 1910, those wash houses were being used by like 60,000 people a week. A big step for public health.
So people were fighting back against the conditions, and that Boer War recruitment thing, that was a real shock to the system, wasn't it?
A proper wake-up call for the nation. It sparked this whole debate about national efficiency,
All right.
and that led to actual government initiatives aimed at improving health. Things like uh, Swedish drill, basically PE in schools, free school meals started coming in,
Yeah.
medical inspections for kids.
Even the Boy Scouts.
Yeah. That movement partly grew out of this concern for fitness and character, and the reflective piece makes this clear.
Yes.
Even with the government getting more involved, charities were still absolutely vital. There was no real welfare state back then.
And sadly, poverty hasn't gone away in London.
No, it hasn't, which means many of those charities founded way back in the 19th century, they're still needed today, still doing crucial work.
Okay, so we've painted this picture, this landscape of really deep poverty, widespread disease. It's a grim backdrop.
It really is.
And now let's shift focus slightly to maybe the most infamous part of this era, particularly in the East End, the Jack the Ripper murders, 1888 to 1891, right, in Whitechapel.
Exactly. And it's just so important to place these horrific crimes within the context we've been discussing. The victims, they were overwhelmingly women, mostly prostitutes, living right in the heart of that extreme poverty and vulnerability.
The canonical five, they're usually called.
That's the term often used, yes. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, though other names sometimes come up too.
And the murders themselves were just exceptionally brutal.
Horrific. The sources mention the cutthroats, the abdominal mutilations. That night they called the double event, when both Stride and Eddowes were killed. Just chills you.
And the post-mortem on Mary Kelly?
Dr. Bond's report, yes. It details just unbelievable savagery.
Now, when people talk suspects, one name always seems to come up: Montague John Druitt.
He's definitely a prominent figure in ripperology, yes. You see him discussed a lot online, like on that Reddit forum. And crucially, Sir Melville Macnaghten, who was high up in the police investigation at the time, he strongly suspected Druitt.
Okay, so who was this guy? Montague John Druitt.
Well, the basics are, he was an assistant schoolmaster. He lost his job right around the time of the last canonical murder, Mary Jane Kelly, November 88.
Okay.
And perhaps most disturbingly, his own family apparently suspected him, thought he might be the killer.
His own family, wow. Where was he from? Did he know Whitechapel?
He was from South London, actually. No obvious connection to Whitechapel.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some, fuzziness about where exactly he was during all the murders, that August to November period.
And the Reddit discussion mentions something interesting.
Yeah.
About him potentially needing to disguise himself.
Yeah, the idea being that someone like Druitt, from a relatively privileged background, he'd stick out like a sore thumb in Whitechapel unless he deliberately dressed down, tried to blend in, slumming it, as they put it.
Right, trying not to be noticed.
And Druitt had this whole other side to him, too. He was quite the sportsman.
Oh, yeah.
The Blackheath Cricket Club records connect him to Kingston Park and Dorset County Cricket Club. He played serious cricket Winchester First 11. Good at fives, too, apparently. And supposedly could throw a cricket ball over 92 yards.
So, an athletic guy from a decent background. How does the timeline fit?
Well, this is where it gets really intriguing, maybe sinister. He disappeared very soon after Mary Jane Kelly was murdered.
Disappeared.
Yeah. And his body was found in the Thames at the very end of December 1888.
Drowned.
The official verdict from the coroner's inquest was suicide, whilst of unsound mind.
Suicide. And Inspector Macnaghten was convinced it was him.
He seemed very sure, yeah. He mentioned relying on private information.
Which might have just been rumor.
Possibly hearsay, yeah. Likely related to what his family supposedly thought that he was mentally unstable and might be the Ripper. Scotland Yard files mentioned the family's suspicions.
But no actual proof, no smoking gun.
No. That's the key thing the Reddit discussion points out, too. No concrete evidence directly links Druitt to the crimes. Eyewitness descriptions of the Ripper are vague and only kind of match Druitt's age bracket.
But the timing is still suggestive, isn't it?
It is compelling. The disappearance, the suicide, right after the murder stopped. It makes you wonder.
Could he have, committed those earlier murders, Nichols and Chapman, and just gone back to his normal life? His teaching, his cricket games?
That's the chilling possibility, isn't it? And that's where the cricket club connection loops back in.
Blackheath, right. Or Kingston Park via Blackheath's records.
Right. Now, Kingston Park isn't Whitechapel, obviously. But being part of that kind of club suggests he moved around London. He wasn't just confined to his South London area or his school.
So he could travel across the city.
And again, that Reddit point about maybe needing to change clothes, blend in, It speaks to that potential movement between different social worlds.
And the cricket season, it overlaps with the murders, doesn't it? August to November 1888.
Broadly, yes. We don't have the exact 1888 match list for his club from these sources, but clubs like that were certainly active then, which raises that, well, purely speculative and dark question.
Could someone use a normal routine, like playing cricket, as cover?
Could those periods have been used for something else
Yeah.
within the same huge city? It's impossible to know, but it adds another layer to the mystery.
But we have to stress, this is speculation.
Absolutely, it's not proof. But it's a really unsettling meeting point, isn't it, between the social history, the poverty, the disease we talk about,
Yeah.
the everyday life like sports, and then this incredibly dark criminal case, all happening in the same London.
It really shows how even with those massive social divides, London was still one interconnected, complex place.
Exactly. The divisions didn't mean total isolation between the rich and poor, the respectable and the desperate.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We've covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have.
We've seen just how devastating poverty was for health in late 19th century London. Just brutal.
Yeah, the link is undeniable.
But we also saw improvements starting to happen, often pushed by charities, even if huge inequalities remained.
Slow, gradual change, but it was happening.
And then looking through that grim window of the Jack the Ripper case, it just highlights the human cost of those conditions and these strange, maybe disturbing connections that could exist across London's social layers.
Which leads us to a final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to ponder.
Okay.
How much of this resonates today? Those Victorian disparities, poverty, health, vulnerability, even crime hotspots, do we see echoes of that in our cities now? Are there modern Whitechapels maybe hidden in plain sight where similar problems exist?
That's a really powerful thought to end on. Definitely something to think about.
If you want to explore more, there's so much out there. Social history, public health reforms, the Ripper mystery itself. Lots to dig into.
For sure. Well, thanks for unpacking all of that. Really fascinating, if grim at times.
It certainly paints a picture of a very different, very challenging London.